Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Rank, where I climb the online Series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we're featuring a super cool team that finished in the top 30 of the previous ranked season. It was built and piloted by China Sapphire, who is actually the Hong Kong national champion. Really exciting to see because we actually featured his Xerneas Groudon team a few weeks ago. And then, yeah, he won Hong Kong Nationals. And I'm not surprised. He's been an amazing player and team builder in Series 12. And he's going to be competing in Day 2 of the World Championships this year. So definitely a player that you'll want to watch out for. I've linked his Twitter down in the description below. And he finished in the top 30 of the last ranked season with this team. So, as always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please show your support by leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. And let's talk about the team. So first of all, I've been showing pastes for the teams recently, but I figured maybe it's a little bit easier to actually show them in Showdown so I can, highlight each individual set rather than, you maybe having to squint a little bit to actually see all the Pokemon, especially if you're watching on mobile. So if this is something that you do enjoy, let me know in the comment section below. Really appreciate any feedback. Before we dive into the individual sets, I actually want to talk about the archetype of Groudon and Calyrex Ice Rider a little bit. This duo has not really been common, especially in North America and Europe, really at all, but there have been a lot of high-level Japanese players and players from Asia in general that have been using this recently. And so it's interesting, right? First of all, you have a lot of just heavy offense, right? These are two of the strongest Pokemon in the format, and they also get really good spread type attacks between Glacial Lance and Precipice Blades. Calyrex also cancels out berries via its ability, right? And so Groudon, these days it feels like every Incineroar is carrying a Shuka Berry. So Groudon has a nice time going up against those Incineroars that, because you don't have to worry as much about Shuka Berry, you can even switch in Calyrex Ice Rider, cancel out the berries, and then just Precipice Blades with ease. This team in particular is interesting because it's a very different take on the Groudon, and it actually uses CHOICE SCARF Groudon. Now, I think it's really cool as an option because when you see this team in Team Preview, you always expect the Groudon to really be a more slow pace set, maybe with Assault Vest, for example. The idea of Scarf Groudon here is that you can use it to outspeed a lot of Pokemon that otherwise would expect to be faster than Groudon and can normally do huge amounts of damage to it. So I'm talking Pokemon like Zacian, Charizard, for example, Thundurus. With all of those, now Groudon can actually outpace them. And what's really important is that this Groudon is used for good speed control. It's actually not Bulldoze with the Policy User, which is a set that I've really liked using, but instead it's Rock Tomb, right? And so Rock Tomb is really nice because it's actually super effective into the aforementioned Charizard and Thundurus. And what's really cool is that you can combo it with this Celesteela set, right? Now, this is an offensive Celesteela set with Meteor Beam and Power Herb, and it's pretty fast as you can see as well. With this speed investment, after you get 2 speed boosts via Max Airstream, you can outspeed pretty much everything in the format other than Regieleki and, maybe random Choice Scarf Pokemon. But the idea with Groudon here is that you can Rock Tomb into something that normally expects to outspeed this duo, like Thundurus, and then Celesteela can just finish it off with a Power of Meteor Beam combination. So you can do the same thing with Charizard, right? And so it's a very big surprise because, yeah, you just normally don't expect Scarf on Groudon. This also allows your Groudon to just outpace opposing Zacians, and you can see it's just max attack and max speed, Jolly Nature here, just to make sure you pretty much outpace everything that you can. Celesteela here, we already kind of talked about a little bit, but this is an offensive slot with Air Slash, Flash Cannon, Meteor Beam, and Protect. So, you're using your same type of attack bonus as well with Air Slash and Flash Cannon, and then Meteor Beam is your way to, get a quick special attack boost. This is a Pokemon that can snowball things out of control, especially with Beast Boost, and it's really nice because, Zacians can't actually do that much into it. Secret Sword and Behemoth Blade will, chip away at it and, maybe do, 30, 40-ish%, but it's definitely not going to KO Celesteela. And so this in itself has a really favorable matchup into a lot of the Pokemon in the format. You think about something like Venusaur, for example, which at best can either Sleep Powder or Weather Ball, but otherwise, Celesteela can fare super well and wall a lot of Pokemon in the format. That brings us to our next Pokemon, which is Calyrex Ice Rider. This is White Herb, right? And so White Herb is really valuable because Incineroar is, used so frequently, especially to slow down Calyrex's damage output. This completely changed the tides of the battle where it makes Incineroar relatively useless. And then your opponents actually even have to think twice about bringing Incineroar because you just add so much value by ignoring Intimidate, then you can just Max Quake into opposing Incineroar. So very classic set here. This is normally what you see on Calyrex's, and you have a little bit of special defense investment here, but the rest is in HP and attack. Next Pokemon is Venusaur here. Standard set in terms of Timid, Max. This is just to make sure you outspeed everything in the format, including Regieleki when you're in the sun. And you've got Frenzy Plant, Protect, Sleep Powder, and Weather Ball. You sometimes see moves like Earth Power or Sludge Bomb over Protect, but Protect is really valuable for this team because Venusaur isn't always going to Dynamax, right? For example, you could go like Groudon Venu and then play towards like a Calyrex Porygon endgame. And so, yeah, you don't necessarily need that many attacks, but in the right position, if you even just get one good Vine Lash off, that can win you the game. Because what this team really likes to do is win the end game using spread type attacks from Glacial Lance and Precipice Blades. Porygon 2 is next here. This is just a super bulky set, as you can see. The main thing to call out is instead of Recover, you actually have Ally Switch to add some variance. I think you could definitely replace it with Recover. But the idea is that this is just a really good Trick Room user to pair with Calyrex and also can Eerie Impulse and shut down special attackers. Finally, you've got Gastrodon. In my experience, this is the Pokemon that comes out the least in terms of just like pure games, but it's really important because this gives you a much needed like answer into a lot of the Kyogre teams that you're going to run into, and obviously Kyogre Zacian is still the most common restricted duo at the moment, and so Gastrodon has a really favorable matchup into that, right? So the idea is that you're going to max Calyrex, Celesteela, or Venusaur most of the time, but Groudon can max in the right position, and what I love about this team is the number of ways you can manipulate speed, right? Groudon, Venusaur lead, so fast duo to begin, and then Porygon, Calyrex, Trick Room in the back, right? Or you can go Groudon, Celesteela, like Rock Tomb into Meteor Beam, and close out the game with Porygon, Calyrex. So there are a lot of different lines that you can take with this team, but you have so many ways to like catch your opponent off guard with the speed. So I've been talking long enough, really excited to try it out. Let's get into things. All right, our first match of the day, and it is Solgaleo plus Groudon. That's really cool. This team is super similar. It might just be the same 6, but a bunch of very high-level Italian players used it to super good success at the European International Championships. So Solg is definitely interesting here. I don't know the Thundurus set. I don't know if it is going to be the like offensive or defensive set. I think Celesteela actually is really cool here. Probably don't bring Gastrodon. Porygon is pretty valuable here because if you look at it here, like I have Foul Play, right? So it's pretty solid into Solgaleo. Ice Rider is interesting because it actually hits 3 of my opponent's Pokemon for super effective, right? But it's really, really weak into Solgaleo. So if you think about how we can beat Solgaleo, it's like stalling out its Dynamax, then using super effective hits. It's one approach. I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of Groudon plus Celesteela, Porygon. And it might be wild, but I almost want to drop Calyrex in this game and just bring Venu instead. Because I think Venusaur is our best Dynamax option here, actually. Celesteela could be a max option as well, but the problem with it is that it's not very good into the Solgaleo because we don't have a max Flare, right? And so I can't really hit Solgaleo for too much damage. But the strength of Celesteela is that it's really good against everything else. I can Meteor Beam Thundurus, Meteor Beam the Incineroar. If the Groudon doesn't have fire type attacks, Celesteela then really, really walls it if you're using just like the, kind of Swords Dance or bulk up oriented sets with Precipice Blades and Stone Edge or Rock Tomb or Rock Slide, for example. So it's going to be Suicune and Solgaleo. Okay. What's interesting here is like I could just say, you know what, I'm going to activate the Solgaleo's weakness policy. But I don't think I love the idea of that. But then you consider that I do have Venusaur in the back. I guess my question is, how fast is Solgaleo here? Are you fast enough? Like, because you would think Suicune's going to want a Tailwind right now, right? I think I'm down to switch out into Porygon 2 here on turn 1 and actually just launch Meteor Beam onto Suicune. So the logic here is I don't want to activate a weakness policy on Solgaleo. I expect Solgaleo to outspeed my Venusaur under Tailwind, and I expect Suicune to Tailwind, right? So when you add all of that up, basically the way around that is bringing out Porygon 2 and then setting up Trick Room. When you go up against some of these steel-restricted Pokemon like Solgaleo and Dialga, your general goal should be to stall out their Dynamax without losing too many resources and too many Pokemon. Because these Pokemon are a lot weaker outside of Dynamax, right? But I can't really just Precipice Blades very easily right now because if I do, Solgaleo doesn't take that much damage, I activate a potential weakness policy, and then Solgaleo just snowballs the game out of control. So for now, we're going to conserve the CHOICE SCARF Groudon. And this is why I didn't feel super good at bringing Calyrex Ice Rider, because it does nothing against either of these Pokemon at the moment, right? And they are going to Dynamax immediately, which is what we want to see here. And basically, we now have 2 pretty defensive Pokemon that are quite solid into my opponent's duel, right? So, like, the Solgaleo, I guess it could be interesting if it's, like, CHOICE SCARF Suicune here, and it goes for a way to activate Policy on Solg. That's the main thing I'm curious about at the moment. But let's see. It is Bulldoze! Very cool. Okay. So it's going to activate the Policy. I think it's still okay because, like, Porygon should be bulky enough. It could be, I guess, a Max Lightning coming out to hit, like, the Celesteela slot. It is. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, did not see that coming. That is interesting. But I honestly think it's still okay. What's interesting now is I expect that to be Scarf Suicune, right? But I can get up a Trick Room with Porygon if I want it. Okay. I'm down to just bring out the Venusaur right now. And actually just Vine Lash into the Suicune and Foul Play into Solgaleo. I don't need to set up Trick Room right now. Trick Room is actually kind of counterintuitive to what I'm trying to accomplish right now. Yeah, I think this works. Actually, I guess the problem is Suicune should be bulky enough to take a Vine Lash, right? So I wonder if Suicune ever considers switching out, but switching out would actually work in my favor because then with Focus Sash, the Venu's looking pretty strong. So I guess my other question is the rest of the moves on Solgaleo. If you're running Lightning, do you have Max Mindstorm as well? Because if not, I don't... Well, I was going to say, does a +2 Steel Spike plus whatever chip you get from Bulldoze get the KO into Venusaur? I do expect it to KO because we don't have any bulk. But I'm curious if they're ever worried about Trick Room from this angle. And Suicune does switch. Okay, I'll take that. Into their own Venusaur. Okay. So that's fine. Especially with Electric Terrain up right now, I don't have to worry too much about the Sleep Powders, at least, right? I'm not going to get very much off this Vine Lash this turn, but that's okay because I'll set it up. I'll break a potential Sash on the Venusaur, and now I can angle for Max Flare into Solgaleo the next turn. I'm also curious if So decides to target like the Porygon slot rather than the Venusaur slot. Because you have to remember, we have Choice Scarf Groudon right now in this endgame, right? Which is incredibly, incredibly strong against Solgaleo. But Solgaleo might angle to set up a defense boost. It is going to be Max Steel Spike here onto the Porygon slot. Okay, that's not bad. So you can see, like, it's a little bit awkward for me right now, right? Because, like, obviously you would think, oh, why don't you just set up Trick Room? But the thing is, like, we're using Choice Scarf Groudon here. If we weren't Scarf Groudon, I actually think the right approach is to just set up Trick Room and then Dynamax with the Groudon slot, but that's not the case here. I think my main concern at the moment in this current game state is, well, one, I don't think Max Flare KOs Solgaleo, so I'm going to Flare to Venusaur slot, but if they are max speed and win a speed tie, which I expect them to be, that could be pretty bad. I don't even really want to click Ally Switch here, truthfully, so yeah, I'm down to just Foul Play Solgaleo here, and then go for the Flare onto the Venusaur slot. The other question is, I guess, whether or not they double up onto my Venusaur, right? So that was the thing, like, we could actually angle for Ally Switch and then Max Flare into their Venu, and then if we win the speed tie, or if it's not even a speed tie, we just get the KO, and then they do indeed target my Venusaur slot, then it's an amazing trade, right? Because I trade a low HP Porygon for a Venusaur, but Solgaleo max guards! Oh. Okay, Venusaur does indeed win the speed tie, but they actually just Energy Ball into the Porygon slot. I feel like that's... I mean, I'm sure they were obviously expecting me to target the Solgaleo slot, but I don't even think a Max Flare would have KO'd it, to be honest. And so I don't think they really needed to go for that. And they actually could have won the game there since they won the speed tie by doubling up onto my Venusaur, I think. But now, I think they're actually in a pretty tough position. Because you just stalled out your own Solgaleo's Dynamax. And I still have another max turn with Venusaur, and I get Choice Scarf Groudon back out on the field. So you add all of that up, and suddenly Groudon's looking really good. So Suicune comes out. We already know that the Solgaleo committed a turn of Dynamax with Max Guard last turn, and they've already used all 3 of turns of their Max going for Lightning Steel Spike. So now I can just Flare Solgaleo. I guess the only interesting thing here is, do you ever go for like a double Protect or even consider switching out? We expect Groudon to be their last Pokemon here, so I think a switch into Groudon definitely could work. But because I have Vine Lash up... Oh, actually, no, we have Scarf Groudon here. So, yeah, it's actually fine to just Vine Lash into Suicune and Precipice Blades. I guess the only risk in going for this is now I can miss Precipice Blades, right? Rather than flaring into Solgaleo. I guess we haven't 100% confirmed whether or not it's Choice Scarf Suicune, because it could be, like, really slow Solgaleo, plus Suicune lets max speed. That's definitely a possibility, but I expect this Scarf. Like, it just makes so much sense, right? So... I don't know if I actually love this play, because I think Flare on a Solgaleo is a little bit more consistent, but what I'm nervous about is like them having Tailwind and then switching out the Groudon into the Venusaur slot. Or sorry, the Solgaleo into the Groudon slot is what I meant to say. Okay, so Precipice Blades doubles connects here. This is the strength of Choice Scarf Groudon, outspeeding both Suicune and Solgaleo. And without Choice Scarf, we're not outspeeding either here, right? Assuming that it is Scarf Suicune. So... really glad to highlight like the strength of an item like Scarf on Groudon here. And even though the first turn went terribly for us, it was still fine. I think the main thing here is my opponent didn't need to play super passively the turn against like Solgaleo's last turn at Dynamax, right? But I'm sure they were worried about a Max Flare or a Max Quake picking up the KO there. I think if I had, I don't know, like 10-15% more damage onto the Solgaleo, I would have gone for Flare there. But I didn't think Flare would even pick up the knockout there anyway, right? And so the worst case scenario that turn was really, really bad for us. But what ended up happening was essentially the best case scenario for us. And completely just turned it from a game that I could lose on that turn to a game that felt pretty much more or less won there. But I do think maybe it was still better to Flare into the Solgaleo slot since I was fairly confident it'd be Scarf Suicune. But you could be Scarf with Tailwind, I suppose. And then, like, I was worried about Solgaleo then outspeeding me. But then if you switched out, like, you'd give up your weakness policy boost. And even if you go for the double protect there, I don't know if you survive Max Flare. So, I don't know. Like, the scary thing is if I miss Precipice Blades there on the Suicune, it could still be a disaster. The missing on Solgaleo there I think is fine, because I don't even think a +2 Steel Spike would KO my Groudon, and then the Venusaur still at the Focus Sash intact. But yeah, Scarf Groudon comes up huge for us there. Celesteela. One thing I found while using this team is I often do end up just sacrificing it because players play really aggressively to get rid of it on turn 1, but that often can be worth it because Celesteela is not exactly the only offensive member on this team, right? You get so much value from Scarf Groudon, from Calyrex Ice Rider, and from Venusaur as well. So, yeah. Second game of the day here, and we're up against Groudon, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, Charizard, Venusaur. Groudon, Calyrex, of course, a really strong duo. It's funny because we actually featured that in like the very beginning of the season, if I remember correctly, and it's kind of come full circle now. We're won the North American International Championships, piloted by James Evans, who was just so amazing with it throughout that event, and Milwaukee Regionals the week before. So, if we can get Trick Room up, like, Calyrex is amazing here, but it's not that easy to get Trick Room up in this matchup. I'm actually intrigued by Groudon Celesteela again, because if they lead Groudon, or Charizard, I can Rock Tomb into Meteor Beam. Like, I kind of want to go with the fast route here. Groudon, Celesteela, Venusaur, Calyrex. Because the thing is, if you're my opponent, like, you should be super anti-Porygon too, right? Like, you want to do everything in your power to KO it. The best way for them to KO Porygon would be something like a Charizard Groudon lead. You know, when I've used like Charizard Groudon teams, my main method to beat Porygon is just going Charizard Groudon, because like you have so much sheer firepower through that, right? You have the Sun setting up from Groudon, and then you can just Wildfire Precipice Blades into Porygon, or even Blast Burn, Dynamax Groudon, Max Quake into Porygon too. Those are two lines that you can take. Gastrodon, once again, is you know, more for Kyogre teams here. Doesn't really make any sense in this matchup, so we never consider that in team preview here. Just doesn't really provide anything for us. And then Porygon is a really good Pokemon, honestly. I think in a best of 3, I would definitely consider adjusting and maybe even leading Porygon if my opponent's lead here was not very good against the Porygon. But it's actually Charizard and Venusaur. That's very awkward because I just set up the Sun for my opponent. This is not good at all, actually. This is a really good lead by them. This is the best possible lead they could have had here, because now you can just, like... Well, what's interesting is, who do you backs here, right? Do you Sleep Powder with Venusaur on a Groudon? Do you risk that? Sleep Powder and then just go for a Fire-type attack on a Celesteela certainly makes some sense. I'm down a Rock Tomb here. They could also just max the Venu here, but normally with Venu, like, you would probably expect Assault Vest on Groudon, so I kind of expect Sleep Powder and then a Fire-type attack into Celesteela. Yeah, this is an awful lead from me, unfortunately, into what they brought. And this is the strength of this duo, right? Like, both are just amazing Pokemon with amazing residual side effects. The thing is, Porygon would have been okay here, but it would have probably just got hit by a Sleep Powder and a Vine Lash. Or sorry, Sleep Powder and a Wildfire immediately. So what else would have worked well against this? I don't know. Now that I think about it, I don't have a safe lead against this duo. Because, like, Groudon and Calyrex just aren't that good into... Oh, they're slower with the Venusaur, though. Okay. No way. We're gonna KO the Charizard. This went from, like... Today's episode's been kind of funny, because, like, it's been... Well, I think I'm gonna lose the game if this turn goes poorly, to... Oh, now I think I win the game. I'm so happy to feature the Groudon Celesteela duo here, though. It just, like, if Venusaur's max speed, right, this doesn't work out super well, but it makes me think it's, you know, bulky Venusaur. And it makes sense, right, because with Venusaur, like, outspeeding Choice Scarf Groudon isn't that common of a benchmark, right? It could make some sense because, you know, Choice Scarf Kyogre do exist, and so, but it's like you don't really expect to need to outspeed Choice Scarf Kyogre anyway, right? Especially as a Venusaur player when you have Groudon on your team. But yeah, I mean, that should actually just win us the game now. So that's the thing, right? Even when, like, the lead can look really bad, EV spreads are such a big deal in competitive Pokemon. If your opponent doesn't have, like, the right spread to win them, like, in that position, it could actually completely turn the tides. So, this is still not over by any means, though, right? Like, Groudon's now in this weird position. They have Calyrex in the back. Or not in the back, it's out on the field now. They're probably going to just try to Sleep Powder into Celesteela. I don't know which one of these two is Focus Sash. I would expect it to be on Calyrex, so what I want to do here is switch out into Venusaur, and then protect Celesteela right now. Yeah, this game is actually still far from over, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're obviously in pretty good shape at the moment, but my opponent still has 2 restricteds, right? And with Groudon being asleep here, this turn's actually pretty awkward. And I don't have any resistances. They actually protected Venu. Okay. Well, that's a good play. And probably Astro Barrage. The question is now, do I want to Dynamax Venusaur? Because I could Dynamax Calyrex, but I think the answer is yes, because what I want to do is essentially Max Flare to KO their, I was going to say Max Flare to KO Venusaur, but it might actually be better to Dynamax than Vine Lash here instead. See, the thing is, if I Flare, I can Air Slash, but then Astral is just so powerful. I also have Sleep Powder. Do I really need to click that right now? Because if I miss, I'm just in terrible shape, right? Okay. I think I actually am willing to just go for Vine Lash here, honestly. And I'll Air Slash into the Venu slot. Because we have Calyrex Ice in the back. I don't know if I love how I played that, but I also don't know what I could have done. You know what? I think the right approach in this game was to actually just stay in with Groudon and actually sacrifice both Groudon and Celesteela to get a free switch into Venusaur and Calyrex. Because with Focus Sash intact on Venusaur and Dynamax, it would take so much less damage. Not the Focus Sash wouldn't be relevant, but, you know, if I didn't switch it into an Astral Barrage the way I did just now. Okay, they actually protect the Calyrex, which I think I'm okay with for now. Because I'm really curious, like, does your Venusaur just try to KO my Venusaur here? Air Slash would then get the KO onto their Venu, right? And I'm at +2 right now. Okay, they go for Sludge Bomb. I don't even know if that KOs. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I think they would have been better off just clicking Astral Barrage here. Now the game's definitely over. I don't think my opponent can ever come back from this angle. But it makes sense, especially without, like, knowing the item on my Venusaur. But if you're Focus Sash on Calyrex, I think you should always attack there personally. Because you're just in such a good position to, like, snowball with Calyrex out of control from that angle. So I'm glad to have highlighted, like, some of the big surprises with this team. But I'm also not, like, super content about how either this game or the previous one played out. Because, like, in this game, the game looked lost from the leads, right? You never want to, like, be in a losing position from turn 1. Because if my opponent had a faster Venusaur there, the game was definitely just over immediately. So I am just going to Vine Lash now into the Calyrex slot and protect. Oh, actually, do we need to protect here? No, I don't think so. I think Air Slash is just fine. Because what I don't want is for Groudon to get a Swords Dance off and potential. Well, how would they win? Double protect with Calyrex into Swords Dance, maybe? That's the only thing I'm worried about. But we've got a +2 Celesteela now, just sweeping through. And it's faster than Groudon, which is beautiful. Okay, there's Air Slash. Woof! That did 90%. Vine Lash should finish it off now. So I think this game, that turn 1 itself, highlights why, like, EV spreads in Pokemon can make such a big difference, right? As Groudon actually hangs on with, I think, what's literally 1 HP. But basically, if they're faster with Venusaur there and they hit Sleep Powder on Groudon, I'm just completely screwed, right? But because of dynamic speeds, not only are we faster, but then Rock Tomb drops Charizard speed, allowing us to just KO them, and my opponent didn't have a Dynamax to play with in this game. What's scary, though, is I actually think they had a lot of comeback potential with Calyrex Shadow Rider, but fortunately for us, like, they played a little bit defensive. I feel like both in this game and the previous one, my opponents went for a Protect when they didn't necessarily need to, but like I said, I don't know Calyrex's item here, so if they weren't Sash and they were worried about Life Orb Venusaur, like, one-shotting them, I can definitely understand that. The other thing I think my opponent may have been expecting there was me to actually click Sleep Powder with Venusaur, because they were like, you're not going to Dynamax something that's that low HP, right? So it worked out well for us, but, you know, if they had, for example, Weather Ball on Venusaur, or if they didn't protect Calyrex there, a lot could have gone wrong. So the thing about Pokemon is, like, you're not always going to find, like, the perfect plays. You're, like, you know, not always going to find the right leads as well, and sometimes you're going to have to play from behind, and, you know, like, you always assume the worst. Like, in that example, I just assumed Groudon was definitely going to be, or sorry, Venusaur was definitely going to be faster than Groudon, but sometimes, right, your opponent actually doesn't have the move you expect them to have, or doesn't have the EV spread you expect them to have, and it just completely changes how, like, the game can play out. But that being said, it's still scary, right? Because, like, if my opponent were just a more classic fast Venusaur there, that game would have been completely different. So then what I always like to do is reflect on the battle and say, okay, let's say they were indeed just the typical Venusaur, which I normally would expect. How do I beat the Charizard Venusaur lead? Which you could see me trying to do in the beginning of the game, because I was like, oh, this is actually a really good lead by my opponent. The sad answer is I don't think there's a very clear solution. Gastrodon, once again, can't really come out in this matchup. I think Porygon 2 would be it, because it essentially, like, if you lead Charizard Venusaur, like, you can't KO Porygon on turn 1. What you can do is go for something like switch into Groudon and just Wildfire into Porygon, or Sleep Powder and Wildfire into Porygon. But then that means I can have something next to Porygon to divert pressure away, maybe something like Celesteela or even my own Groudon. The scary thing here is that I just don't have any Pokemon that can take attacks well from both Charizard and Venusaur, so there's never a really consistent, easy lead here for me, in my opinion. Porygon at least is, like, a little bit more defensive, and so if I lead something like Porygon and Groudon, it's like I put on pressure onto Charizard with Rock Tomb, I put on pressure onto the Venusaur as well, and Porygon pressures with Trick Room. If Trick Room goes up in this matchup, Calyrex Ice Rider should just win. So essentially, there's no safe way to just, like, you know, not lose either of my Pokemon on turn 1, but what I can force my opponent is taking a bad trade, and then either getting the speed advantage with Groudon and then maxing Venusaur, or getting the speed advantage with Porygon. So I think an interesting 4 instead is Porygon plus Groudon lead with Calyrex and Venusaur potentially in the back, or even just my own Groudon Venusaur lead immediately. But that one's still a little bit scary because I normally assume Focus Sash on Venusaur until otherwise, and I don't want to really just risk the game on a Sleep Powder turn 1 on Charizard either. So I think if I were to replay that, that's probably the method I would go with. It's still not very, like, consistent, but this matchup isn't great because their restricteds and their non-restricteds, I think, fare a little bit stronger against ours. So yeah, either way, I've been talking on for long enough, so let's look for a third. Third game of the day here, and it's Yveltal Kyogre. Very cool, with Tsareena, Regieleki, Tornadus, and Incineroar. We just featured 2012 Senior Division World Champion Toller Webb's Yveltal Kyogre team, which was, you know, hyper offensive, but this one's even more hyper offensive. You know, the previous team we had featured at least had, like, Light Clay Grimm. This is just very, very high, fast-paced offense. So I think the right approach is probably Trick Room and Dynamax Calyrex Ice Rider. My question is, how do I get there? Like, I also probably want to bring Gastrodon here. If I lead Porygon, they could lead something like Incineroar or even Taunt with Tornadus, which concerns me. I think, like, just a classic Tornogre lead from there and concerns me. But I think Venusaur, because we have Focus Sash, is intriguing. You know what's crazy? But I almost, like, don't even want to bring Groudon here because they have Tailwind, Intimidate, and Kyogre. So Groudon just can't actually do very much other than change the weather. I think I'm actually going to play without it. Well, actually, no. The strength of Groudon is with this lead, I can turn 1 pivot out into Groudon immediately with Porygon and not necessarily set up Trick Room. So maybe I still bring it. Celesteela is pretty interesting here. All of our Pokemon are good, admittedly, here. So, okay, I think I'm going to go Porygon, Venu, Groudon, Calyrex. I think Porygon, Venu is one of the scariest leads to go up against because it pressures both Trick Room and Sleep Powder on turn 1. And with Focus Sash on Venu here, I don't even necessarily need to switch out, right? Because you'd have to double up onto Venusaur to KO it and deny it from Sleep Powdering, or have Taunt, potentially. So, we'll see. Feels weird to not bring Gastrodon in this matchup, given the Kyogre. That's going to be Yveltal and Kyogre immediately. Okay. What do I want to do against this lead? Oh, this is really interesting. Because I honestly want to just set up Trick Room here. Like, I'm actually willing to just sacrifice Groudon, I think, to get Trick Room up. Because if we get Calyrex Ice Rider under Trick Room with Porygon next to it, and Venusaur in the endgame, things look really good. So I'm down to go to Groudon immediately, and then just Trick Room here. The other play is to actually switch Porygon out, and then either Vine Lash Kyogre. I'm down to Trick Room here. Like, I think if you're my opponent, you play pretty offensively against the Venusaur right now, because you expect Venusaur to Dynamax and Groudon to come in the other way. If I trade Groudon to get Trick Room up, it is the best possible scenario here for me. So, I think a lot of players would expect Porygon to switch into Groudon there rather than Venusaur. Something like Max Darkness makes sense. You could Dynamax Kyogre and go for Max Hailstorm, because it would cover for Venusaur or Groudon in that position. But it is going to be Max Yveltal, fine by me. Yeah, if it's something like Darkness Water Spout, then Calyrex Ice Rider comes in, and we're in a pretty interesting position. Yep, it is Darkness. Onto the Porygon slot. So they didn't really respect the option of me switching out into Venu here. Like, because I could have just gone for Vine Lash immediately there. But like I said, I'm okay losing Groudon here. I want to lose Groudon. So, yep, Water Spout. Okay, cool. Beautiful. Now, we lost a lot of resources there, so I gotta make this worth it for me. But I'm okay with the positioning for now. It's Life Orb on the Kyogre, actually. That's interesting. Okay. We get Trick Room up. I guess the scary thing here is, like, I don't really have Recover on Porygon, right? And right now, Venu's in an awkward spot, because, like, it's actually going to be faster than my opponent. Oh, but if I change the weather with Max Hailstorm, it won't be faster anymore. Yes, so we're going to Max Hailstorm here into Yveltal. And if you're my opponent, you would just, what, Water Spout and then Max Darkness into the Calyrex slot. That would make sense. So I'm not an Eerie Impulse Kyogre and Hailstorm. I think the problem is I may have lost like too many resources immediately, but they actually switch out Kyogre probably into Incin, but we have White Herb here. And this is where White Herb is just such a huge item for us. The problem though is that now Porygon's in a pretty bad spot going into the next turn. This is actually where Ally Switch could have been handy for us. Yeah, I think because I'm used to playing with Recover on Porygon, like, I don't know, I was thinking that trade in the beginning would be worthwhile, but the thing is, because Venusaur doesn't actually outpace some of my opponent's Pokemon under Trick Room, this is actually still a little bit awkward. I can pretty easily Max Quake to just KO next turn. I think next turn the play is probably just, well, you would expect him to Fake Out, right? And then just Darkness into Calyrex. I also don't know the Yveltal set here, like whether it's physical, special, or mixed. Oh, we almost just KO'd them there. Man, I actually could have clicked Foul Play then into that slot. I probably should have respected Policy a little bit more here, but they're not Policy, okay. Foul Play onto Yveltal there would have just won us the game. I didn't think we'd do that much with Hailstorm. That's so much damage. Yeah, there's Darkness. Oh, they actually target the Porygon slot. Okay, that works well for us then. Lower my special defense. Okay. Now I bring out Venusaur. Now Focus Sash will be broken here, unfortunately. But Instinct can't. I wonder if you ever just Flare Blitz here. Like, you also don't have Shuka Berry here on Instant at this point. So, you know, Quake is really safe into it. But I have to be really careful because I only have 3 turns of Trick Room left. I want to Max Quake and Protect here, I think. It's just so tempting to actually just click Weather Ball into Yveltal, but if Instant survives a Max Quake and then just Flare Blitzes Venusaur, it's a really big disaster, so I think I will Protect. They switch out. That's a really good play. into Kyogre, though. Okay. Kyogre coming out here is not the end of the world, because now Focus Sash is back on the field for Venusaur. I can also Weather Ball their Incineroar. Hoping to see Yveltal Max Guard here. That would make me very happy. Okay, cool. That turn actually worked out very nicely for us then, in the grand scheme of things. I almost don't want to click, like, Hailstorm now, because I really don't want to change the weather, and then, like, 2 Quake should KO Kyogre. The special defense boosts are pretty sweet for us right now as well. I think here I actually want to Weather Ball into Yveltal. And Quake into Kyogre, because that covers for an Incineroar switching into either slot right now. 2 turns of Trick Room left. +1 special defense, neutral, neutral, neutral. Yeah, I'm down for that. Quake and Weather Ball. I think Kyogre protecting here feels fairly likely. Yveltal does switch out. If it's instant, like, I could have doubled up onto that. Maybe that was just a better play, honestly. Because the thing is, late game Yveltal kind of sweeps me right now, right? Against this duel that I have out on the field. Yeah, I think I would have... Maybe I needed to make the read there, because I'm already kind of far behind in this game at the moment. And, like, Weather Ball is just not really going to do enough to Incineroar here, because it hasn't really taken any damage thus far in the battle. But what's interesting is, if you don't... I mean, surely you have Foul Play on Yveltal, right? Like, what I ideally want to do is get Trick Room up again in this game. Getting Weather Ball here is satisfying, but it's not going to KO. That's really good damage, actually, but not enough. Dynamax ends. Now you have Fake Out, Pressure. See, the interesting thing is with Kyogre, is your only water type attack Origin Water Spell? Because if that's the case, you're actually in a really weird spot right now. Like, I'm actually down to double Protect right now. Yeah, because basically the way we win this game is Calyrex Ice Rider under Trick Room and just Glacial Land spamming everything. Yes, I'm at -1, but that's still okay for now. And we know it's Life Orb on the other end. And if they stay in with the Incineroar here, I mean, they should switch, right? Yeah, I'm going to double Protect. If they stay in, I think we're actually in super good shape. Okay, nice. Unless they went for Self-Parting Shot. But that would be really weird, because you could just hard switch at that point. So the reason this is a big deal is because now I can Weather Ball into the Incineroar slot next turn, and then just set up Trick Room again with Calyrex. What we needed to do is make sure Yveltal did not hit the field right now. And it is Ice Beam there. And the thing is, I think Kyogre will actually survive the Ice Beam, but with not that much HP, right? So I'm going to Weather Ball to KO the Incineroar here. I think Ensign should switch into whatever their last Pokemon is. But that's fine. We Trick Room, and we just Weather Ball here. Yeah, I think this is the play. And then Glacial Lance, like, we just... Oh, they're going to stay in. That's really good for me, in my opinion, because I think, like, it was better for them. We're also faster with Venusaur there, by the way, so we just confirmed that. Good to know. Yep, it's Ice Beam. Cool. We have Sash, so as long as we don't get frozen here, we're good. Nice. That should be in Glacial Lance KO range. Yveltal's in Glacial Lance KO range, and at this point, there's nothing else that resists Ice-type attacks, right? So, this is just an amazing endgame for Calyrex Ice Rider, in my opinion. So let's see. Glacial will KO Kyogre, it'll KO Yveltal. Basically, what I was worried about was them hard switching Incineroar out into Yveltal, so then you have Yveltal plus Kyogre to try to KO Calyrex to deny me a second Trick Room, but it's a really hard play to make, because if I just attack there, they could lose the game immediately, right? But now, I think switching Instant was good there, because at least you can cycle it back in for an Intimidate and a Fake Out, and you can outspeed Venusaur under Trick Room, but now I just Glacial Lands, right? And Weather Ball into the Yveltal slot. And, like, even though we're intimidated, well, everything's at such low HP, which is what this team does super, super well. So, when I mentioned, you know, in covering this team, so much about it is, like, distributing enough damage that in the late game, you can just sweep with either Groudon or Calyrex Ice Rider. So, in that first match, it was Groudon, Scarf Groudon coming out, you know, and just, like, getting that Precipice Blades off to KO both the Suicune and Solgaleo. And then in this game, it was Calyrex Ice Rider getting another set of Trick Room up to Glacial Land. So, I'm actually really happy because we featured a lot of the different components of this team, right? Like, Groudon was very important in that first game. Celesteela was critical in outspeeding and KOing Charizard after that Rock Tomb in game 2. And that Scarf Rock Tomb certainly caught my opponent off guard. And then in this game, it was Calyrex Ice Rider doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So I absolutely love this team. I think, you know, you don't see Scarf Groudon too much. A lot of the times the Scarf Groudon is paired with like a weakness policy user, but this uses it in a very different way because it's mainly used to just be really good heavy offense against like Zacian, as well as, you know, Rock Tomb speed control so that you catch your opponents off guard and take advantage of that with Celesteela. So yeah, thank you so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.